Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and we are here for the Q&A with Mayor Steve Hagerty.
Hi, Malika. It's great. I'm so excited that you are the first local reporter that we've asked to come into the mayor's office and do something live on Facebook over lunchtime. And I'm sure there's some folks out there watching, and I know lots of people that have questions about what's going on in the city these days. A lot is going on, and so I'm happy to try and answer the questions, and I'm happy that you're here asking them. So you're free, and just so everybody knows, you are free to ask me any question that you want. I don't know the questions that are going to be asked. If I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know the answer. If I don't have an opinion, I'll say I don't have an opinion. But just want to try to get more information out there to folks.
Well, that's what we love about you, is that you will be honest and say, I don't know. Let me find out about that, instead of just giving us some...
I try. I try. I try.
So we do appreciate that about you. And I went to the last town hall. I believe that was last year.
Yeah, so this is different. It was It was actually in the late in the winter. We had it over at the Levy Center. There were probably about 100 people that came to that. It was a lively town hall.
Yes, it was. And let me tell you, when people have asked if I'm ever going to run for office, alderman or anything, after watching that, I was like, there's no way. There's no way I would get up in front of a room, because there's no pleasing everybody. But you handled it, and you were just very personable and honest. And that's what I think people really appreciated.
None of us are ever going to all agree on anything. I mean, even, and that's just the way it is. So I think that, we ought to respect, differences of opinion that we have, and different, but also demand of one another, logic and a rationale for why they believe what they believe. And it's okay to challenge people, and I'm challenged all the time, and I think that's healthy for democracy and for decision making.
Okay, well, we appreciate you pulling this Q&A together, because I think oftentimes the people of Evanston, they get misinformation, and many of us can't stay awake long enough for all the city council to the very end to even hear how you all came to the decisions that you've made.
Yeah.
So I think city council oftentimes gets a lot of heat, because there's misinformation out there.
Sure, there's misinformation out there, and I will tell you. I mean, this is a considerable city, right? I mean, we've got 75,000 people, a $335 million budget all in, with utilities and everything else. And there's a lot of issues out there every single day. It's, these aldermen work really, really hard. If you've seen those city council packets can be 500, 600, 700 pages of material to go through. So, and these are part-time positions that, including the mayor, and these aldermen are all part-time positions, the way that we've set it up here. So the aldermen work really, really hard to try to stay up on these issues, but even then, it's a lot. And so it's a lot to ask all of our residents to know everything as well. And so I think the city does a good job pushing information out there. There's a lot of information that the city puts out. The city wins awards for transparency, but nonetheless, there's still people that want more information, or people that feel like, I didn't know that, or hadn't heard that. So
it's a lot of I didn't know. So this is you all's opportunity. This is interactive. You can send us your questions right now while we're live for the mayor, and he is ready to receive.
Yep, and I'm going to try to be. I know there's lots of questions, so I'm going to try and be crisp and through these responses, so we can get to them all.
Okay. Now, we got some questions ahead of time.
Okay.
We started promoting it yesterday, and we asked, for those who weren't able to get on the live today, to go ahead and send in your questions. So it was a stack of them.
That's good. That's great. That's great.
Okay, so first question. What's the status of the water pumping station in the 5th Ward?
Okay. So this was a topic of conversation at the last town hall meeting that we had. Construction is underway on that pumping station in the Fifth Ward, and it's right by Church and Dempster. If you go by there, this construction equipment. The project itself is being done by an authority created by Morton Grove and Niles. All of this is part of one of the really important revenue sources for the city of Evanston, which is water sales. We sell to about 40 different communities. Niles and Morton Grove signed I think it was a 40-year contract with the city. That contract generates revenue for the city, which not only supports sort of our water utilities and everything, but just the operations of Evanston. So that project is underway right now. And I know that there has been concern, expressed by some of the neighbors nearby. The city has tried to work and communicate with the neighbors. I can't say that everybody's, satisfied with what's happened. But the project's underway, and it's going to be an important revenue source again to the city. And again, if there are issues that the neighbors were concerned about that come up, whether it's dealing with congestion or noise, the city's going to work with them to try to address those. We don't believe those with a pumping station will be an issue, though.
Okay. Looks like we got a question in. Chris from Facebook. How do you feel about closing Fire Station 4? That's a big topic. That's a big topic, Chris. Thanks
for asking. I don't like the idea of us having to close any fire stations. I also don't like the idea. I don't like the fact that we have a $7.5 million deficit. We have to look at all the operations of the city. The city council is going to listen and ask a lot of questions. There's something that the city manager's office produces, which is called budget memos. And if you just and there'll be a budget memo that is issued, and the city manager puts them out publicly. So again, people can have access to this information. But there's lots of questions that I have, and I think other people have, when that's being proposed as one of the options, which is, okay, how many people are served out of Firehouse 4? What does this mean if you were to close that firehouse to the response times to people in Evanston? What we do know about response times here is they're very good in our city. It's something where the fire department's incredibly proud of. I think the residents are incredibly proud of. They certify state fire departments in this country and municipalities. We have a Class 1 certification. And that means we do things really, really well. If the response time, presumably if you shut that firehouse down, decreases, how much does it decrease? What does that mean for saving people's lives? Because the fact of the matter is that the primary one of the primary jobs of local government is to ensure that our public and our residents are safe here, and that's the hard work that the fire department does, that the police department does, that our health department does. So there's lots of questions that are going to be asked, and I think we need answers to, and we have to look at it in the scheme of everything. I mean, you also have to realize that 55% of our general fund budget is public safety, is fire and police. So when you have a deficit and you have to address it, you have to look at those two departments as well. I don't think you can say, okay, we don't touch those at all. And so I think it's the responsible thing that we're having a conversation about it. We'll see what the answers are to some of these questions and where that conversation goes over the next 4 to 6 weeks.
For those who might not know, where is Fire Station 4?
So
exactly?
yeah, Fire Station 4 is sort of tucked away. A lot of people don't realize it. It's over on Dodge, okay, just south of Main Street. Okay, and I think it's is it Madison or Monroe and Dodge? It's right there at the corner. It's tucked in there. One of the reasons I understand that the city manager chose this fire station is in need of the most capital in terms of repairs and improvements to the fire stations than the other 4 stations here in Evanston. We have 5 stations total in Evanston, and so we need to put more capital money into improving that station. And so I think that was one of the factors in why he's put that out there and proposed that as possibly a station that could be closed.
Okay. We're getting some more questions in.
I bet.
So we have Jean Ferrone from Facebook. She says, why is the city proposing to cut police and fire positions and closing Fire Station 4? Isn't public safety, well, we actually...
Yeah, I think we covered that, Jean. So if there's a more specific question, go ahead and send that in. Let's hit some of the others. But I will say, again, we're getting lots of emails, council members, myself, from folks saying, hey, before you do something like that, please ask a lot of questions. Please look and see if there are other areas within the city that you can, streamline or cut from before you do it. Fire.
J.B. Reese from the city website says, you have been a supporter of tax subsidized housing. Why should local tax dollars from working class families be used to support other lower income families? Okay, great. So thanks for that question, J.B. I am a strong supporter that diversity within a community makes a community a really healthy place to be. And by diversity, I mean socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity. And so, I want Evanston to continue to get as much community development block grant money, what's referred to as CDBG money, that as we can. We get a little over $2 million when you factor in all the HUD money a year that go towards housing and trying to create affordable housing here in Evanston. I am also a supporter of the inclusionary housing ordinance, which generates a pot of money through the development that goes up. Either affordable housing goes into those developments or a developer opts out and pays into this city fund. Okay, the nice thing about the money that's paid into that fund is there are no restrictions. With the HUD CDBG money, there's a tremendous number of restrictions on how that money can be used. With the money generated through our inclusionary housing ordinance, that doesn't exist. So we can be smart about how we're going to put that money to work. I think if you take one example of where Evanston's a leader, really almost in the world, it's in climate action planning. A lot of great things are going on in that area. The Climate Action Resiliency Planning Group is about to issue their report. They just put the draft out to sort of guide us for the next 5 years. We need that same thing when it comes to affordable housing in Evanston, and I'm going to be appointing a affordable housing steering committee, which over the next year is going to actually put together a plan that says, hey, how are we as a city going to invest and allocate this money that's generated through the inclusionary housing ordinance? We also just did assigned a subcommittee to look at the inclusionary housing ordinance, and they've come back with a draft proposal. That draft proposal includes increasing the buyout amount from $100,000 to $175,000, and as well as extending the number of years that something will be affordable when it's built in a new development. Right now it's 25 years, it'll become 30 years. So I think there's some really positive elements of that, but at the end of the day, in a world where when you watch on TV and you see a lot of divisiveness and opinions that people have of rich people or poor people or white people or black people or brown people, the value of living in a community where you have, wealthy people and poor people and brown people and white people and black people, and all of that breaks down a lot of these barriers, in my opinion, that sometimes are just fed in the media. And I think that, we have something pretty special here in Evanston. Not all communities have it, but if we want to retain it, meaning that diversity that we have in Evanston, we have to work at it. And so affordability is one of the things that we're focused on, and the council's been really focused on that. In fact, we've got a special council meeting coming up on October 29th. I think it's October 29th, that Monday, that's going to be focused just on affordable housing. The council made a commitment to do that once a quarter here in Evanston, and they've stuck to it. So more to come in that area. Actually, one of the questions in this stack from Facebook had asked the low-income housing, are they going to be made to look nice? Because oftentimes you can definitely see the difference.
Yeah.
Low income and
Right. So the expectation certainly with developers. So again, if you take some of the developments that are going on in Evanston, they're required to comply with the inclusionary housing ordinance, and that means that the units in there, for the most part, should be pretty comparable. Okay, whether it's a unit that somebody's paying market rate rent for, or they're paying something less because they're in part of the affordable program. There's no separate door, that people are going to enter. We're not going to stigmatize people. Again, we want people of mixed incomes to live amongst one another. I think that's really, really important. And we want people, because we have people in this city that all have mixed incomes, to be able to live and work in the same city. But again, this is a challenging issue, affordability. There are major market forces at play. We're not going to stop those, but we're taking some actions, and I'm pleased with that.
Okay. The questions are really coming in.
All right, I'll try to be shorter, briefer.
Okay. Jean Marie says, are you comfortable with... Okay, Patrick, I'm trying to read your writing here. Are you comfortable with a city no longer having a health and human services department?
So thanks for that question, Jean Marie. So in the proposed budget, there are cuts to the Health and Human Services Department. Am I comfortable? No. I mean, I don't like any of these. Nobody likes any of these cuts. The questions, and again, I think there'll be a lot of questions asked when it comes to this department as well, is, okay, if we're no longer providing this service, is it because is somebody else providing it? Is the county, Cook County providing it? Is the state providing it? Are they going to be able to provide it? If they are, can they provide it at the same level that we can provide it? I mean, a similar analogy is passports. So that's one of the things that's being proposed to eliminate, getting your passport here. And the rationale for that is, well, you know what? You can go to other places within Evanston or to Cook County and get your passport renewed there. And so I think the same thing applies to the health department, but there's lots of questions. Again, the proposed budget has come out a couple weeks ago. The last city council meeting was on a different topic. We didn't talk about the budget. This one coming up this Monday is a really important city council meeting on October 22nd. It is going to be focused on the budget. You are going to hear lots of questions asked both by the public and by council members. And when people need a lot of questions answered before decisions are made. But in general, I think there aren't any aldermen that are comfortable with all the cuts that we have to make. But at the end of the day, we have to figure out a way to close the $7.5 million deficit.
Okay, and speaking of the aldermen, Ross Redhone wrote in, if the aldermen officials are part-time, why do they enjoy the benefits of medical coverage? So thanks for that question, Ross. I couldn't tell you the history of it. I know that's been the case for a long time here. What I will tell you is these part-time positions, whether it's the mayor or the alderman, the mayor makes slightly more. The mayor makes about $10,000 more. It's about $25,300. The alderman around $15,000 a year. These folks work really, really hard. And so the fact that they get full-time medical, it doesn't bother me. Sort of as a taxpayer, I just look at it as a total sort of package to these folks who are real public servants, who are, regardless of what you may think or the decisions that aldermen make or the mayor makes on certain issues, folks are working hard. I have not seen anyone that's not, working their tail off in these, part-time positions. So I don't have a problem that they qualify, but I'm not sure what the history is. It goes back in time. It's not something new that we created. Okay. Benjamin from Facebook says, what are your thoughts on community solar? Should solar energy be available to all residents?
Oh, so So solar energy and I know there's a lot of credits that the state of Illinois has passed, and Kumar Jensen, who's our sustainability coordinator, knows a lot about this. We have looked as a city at how can we use solar panels to help generate electricity and put into the grid, and you actually get sort of paid for this stuff. And we've put some up, and the schools are part of that too. So I'm a supporter, like many people here in Evanston, of trying to use as much renewable energy as we can. The good news is that I'll report. In our climate action plan, our goal was to reduce our carbon emissions by 2016 on our last plan by 20% over 2005 levels. We actually exceeded that, and that'll all be coming out in this final report from the Climate Action Resiliency Plan. But we're on a path, and we've made commitments as a community to be carbon neutral by 2050. And there are other cities around the country that have made that. So we've got a lot of work to do. Solar will be one more way to help us to get there. But yeah, again, there's good programs out there if you're a homeowner to look at through the state, where you get credits and everything to do solar energy, and then you can sell it back into the grid.
Okay, Dr. Adams from the website says, why is the city in such a rush to tear down the Harley Clarke mansion?
Harley Clarke, it's an issue, obviously, that people around town have opinions of. Some people have really strong opinions. Some people are just sort of lukewarm opinions. It's certainly been an issue that's been around for a long time. I mean, the city's been talking about Harley Clarke for over 5 years. It could even be 7 years now. And it is a city asset. It's an asset that the city can't afford to maintain. We've gone through a long process about what to do, looking at private investment. And years ago, the council voted that down with this bed and breakfast, or boutique hotel, rather. So that got voted down. They looked at a state option with the coastal management coming in there. Ultimately, that didn't pan out because the state's in tough financial condition. Took a serious look at a community group here and having them come in and try to revitalize the mansion. There was concern among the council about their ability to raise the funds necessary to do it. And now we're at the point where we're talking about demolishing the mansion, restoring the parkland. This issue has always been controversial, seems like from the very beginning. But I don't think personally that there's been a rush to it. I do think this issue has been around for a long time, and we have been talking about it. Honestly, it probably takes up a lot of time and energy among city staff and council members that could be spent on other issues. There are others we're talking about today, really pressing issues. So, we'll see where this all goes. There's a referendum on the ballot for Harley Clarke. Whether you want to save the mansion or not for public use at minimal to no cost to the taxpayers is basically how it's worded, and we'll see what that comes back with. I have said, and I'll say again, I don't think that this referendum necessarily helps our community a ton. I think that the majority of people would like to save the mansion. The question hasn't been do people want to save the mansion. The question has been, how do we save the mansion? And this referendum doesn't answer that question. How do we save it? It's still about, what is the viable solution for it? And so, some people, have this plan that, hey, maybe we should just take the mansion down and restore it. I think it's a viable plan. Again, personally, I always wanted to save it. I've written about that. I've thought, though, the only viable way to save the mansion was through private investment. to raise the money to do that. But there are others that feel strongly that there shouldn't be any kind of commercial activity, whether it's a bed and breakfast, a restaurant, or something along the lake. I think it would be truly a unique opportunity for us, but it doesn't seem like the community's there on that, on private investment into the mansion.
Okay, another hot one are the arts.
Yes.
I'm affected by the arts because I was definitely one of those kids in the high school.
Yep.
Who needed the arts,
right?
Because otherwise I didn't fit.
Right.
So what's going to happen with the arts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's something that lots of folks are concerned about. Right now in the proposed budget, the arts have been zeroed out, meaning that the Arts Council gets and allocates about $50,000 a year. That $50,000 has gone away right now in the proposed budget, and the cultural arts coordinator, a woman that was here, is no longer here. So that position is gone. My position on this is, the arts create a soul for a community, and I don't really think that we want to zero out the arts. I mean, we have artists that live in Evanston. We have residents that live here, in part because of the community itself and just the artistic feel. I have a whole wall and a whole office. If you could, I know we can't spin this around, but Lisa Deglatoni, who's really involved in the arts community, curates art in the mayor's office, and every 6 months I get different artists in here. I've got these different banners here from the different areas of Evanston. So every single day I look at sort of the artistic talent in Evanston, and I've got a budget document on my desk and I see it zeroed out. I feel strongly that we can't go in that direction. Again, there will have to be some sacrifice on all of our parts to close this deficit. It just has to be. But I don't think that sacrifice should be eliminating, the arts in Evanston. The arts are important. We have to, re-envision how we perhaps manage it, because we don't have that full-time position here in the city. But I think that we still need to have art here in the city. And I know a lot of people will say, well, we need to eliminate art because, I'd rather eliminate art and have, a disease surveillance person in the health department, or, get me something else that I want. Again, I just think there's going to be across the board kind of sacrifices that are made, but it shouldn't all be on the backs of cultural arts and eliminating culture. And again, in the scheme of things, think about our budget. If our general fund budget is around 150, I'm rounding here, we'll say around $115 million. We're talking the arts was $175,000 when you factored in the full-time person and then the grant amount. So again, I don't think you eliminate all of that. I think, we have to still continue to have investment in the arts. And I'm optimistic that at the end of this budget season and process, we will.
Yeah, we can't lose all those kids out there who are just creative geniuses.
Absolutely.
That they're not all, destined for Yale or being mayor, but they have some creativity in other ways. So we have to keep that.
We all need beauty. We all need beauty. we all need beauty in our lives, and art, whether it's performing art, musical art, visual. It's really important to have in our lives. This would be a pretty gray world if we didn't have that.
And also the youth programs. So, there was a time when they said, okay, that is off the table.
Yeah.
They will not be touched. So are they actually back as a possibility?
I'm not aware. I know there's been some. I've gotten a one email on this. I'm not aware that there have been, a reduction to the youth and young adult. I am aware that the city manager wants to assign the manager over there to be focused on workforce development, which is something that's really important to me. It's an initiative of mine. We've got the Mayor's Workforce Advisory Council that's working hard, and I'm hearing really good feedback, and we want somebody that's a point person for that, and that's it's sort of more of a reorganization change there than it is a reduction to community outreach. And again, I think the folks that are in the community outreach group and in the mayor's summer youth employment program that run that do a fantastic job, and I'm not aware, again, and I'm pretty familiar with the budget, that there have been cuts to those programs, but there is a proposed reorg that, again, the city manager is the CEO of the city. He runs the day-to-day operations, and so with that, comes, I expect, good judgment in terms of how he's allocating resources for us, and I trust his judgment.
Okay. Let's see, Anna Vila. Well, this is a good one. Businesses in Evanston tend to open and shut down quickly, which I'm off of Central Street. And I can't stand to see a favorite boutique shut down.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then you hear them working just a regular job, and their boutique was so nice.
Yes.
The little
right.
restaurants. That's one of the beauties of Evanston, is being able to walk outside your house and walk to a mom and pop coffee shop, shop at a boutique. And so now all these little shops are, they're closing. They are. Anna's right. What measures can the city take to help new businesses have a better chance of succeeding? I'd love to see incentives and lower permit costs for both residents and business owners in Evanston.
Yeah. So great.
Thank you, Anna.
Great question, Anna, and thank you. Anna and her husband are the owner of Amanecer Taco, which is down there on Main Street, which is a great taco place. If you haven't been there and you're watching, get to it. So it's hard, right? It's hard to be an entrepreneur and a business owner. I sure don't want to see the city standing in the way and being an obstacle to business owners. The reality is, and all these entrepreneurs and business owners know, business is tough. Okay, and there are trends going on, especially when you talk about the boutiques and some of those shops, where more and more people are shopping online. One of the reasons, there's a bunch of different reasons that the revenues are down, but one of them is, just that mega trend of more and more people buying online, less people buying from brick and mortar. That affects the stores that are down here. If you go around and you talk to a lot of the restaurant owners and the shop owners in Evanston, one of the big things that they would tell you is they would say that, Mayor, I need more customers. I need more density. And that fits in nicely with, again, our commitment to the environment and the fact that we have public transportation and this whole idea of transit-oriented design. And so what can you do from a government perspective to better support small businesses? One, make sure you don't have rules and regulations that are hurdles to them to even starting their businesses. And I would hope that if there are people out there that are starting business and they're pulling their hair out because of some rule that just seems arcane and doesn't make sense, that you would email me so I'm aware of that and can ask some questions. And we have made changes and so forth in the past to try and streamline that. And I know that Paul Zelmazak, who's our economic development director, is absolutely focused on that. The other is, again, supporting development. Again, we need smart and sensible development in Evanston. It doesn't mean that every development is right for Evanston. We're always going to have debate about these things here, but again, looking back in the past where we've had debates about different things, whether it's the movie theater, whether it's Mather, whether it's some of these other developments, in hindsight, I think there's been more good than bad that's come of those, and that will help our small businesses just having more people down here.
Wow, these questions are really coming in.
And we might have to do, and I'm game for this. We might have to do a part 2, and we could set. I've got to travel a little next week, but maybe the following week we could set that up. I'm game for that.
Okay. Yes, I'm game for that.
Okay.
Evanston Live
Great.
TV, we game for that.
Great.
Yes. Okay. How is the city engaging with Northwestern to ask for additional financial and community support? Additional contributions would help close the gap.
Indeed. So it seems like budget deficits are all around this place. Not only are we struggling with our own deficit, again, $7.5 million off of $115 million deficit, so we're talking 6%, a little more than 6% that we have to address. Our neighbor here in our community is also, despite having this big endowment that they have and everything else, having to deal with a deficit, an operating deficit themselves. It's been in the newspapers. I'm not sharing anything that's not known out there. They've actually had to do some layoffs recently of some folks at Northwestern University. So we're all right now in a situation operationally where we're seeing some deficits. Nonetheless, we have a proposal that's in the city managers that I am speaking to the university about actively, which is dealing with the police, the police overtime and time that we spend for all of the football games and for Dillo Day. So we spend a little less than $100,000 of city money on those activities, and I have asked the university to pick that cost up, and because of our deficit, and I anticipate having some positive news along with the university to release on that in the next month. But that's, again, when you think about our deficit, we have looked at activities that are going on with Northwestern University that costs the city of Evanston taxpayers money, and that's a big one that jumps out is with the athletic events. And again, the flip side is obviously those athletic events, generate a lot of economic activity. When you have, Wisconsin and Notre Dame and Michigan come to Evanston to play football, it supports businesses. If you go back to Anna's question, here in town, whether they're getting breakfast tacos or they're getting lunch or they're getting something to drink, people come in for these big events and they spend a lot of money, and the university makes money too, so you could say that. And again, in return, having them pick up the public safety costs of Evanston seems more than reasonable to me.
Will increasing parking fees have a negative impact on businesses? Great
question. So one of the other proposals out there, there's two sides of the equation, right? It's increasing revenue and decreasing expenses in certain areas. So one of the increases in revenue is the city manager's proposed budget actually has no proposed increase in property taxes. Okay, and so he's looking at other fees, and we have a whole bunch of other, as people here that live here know, a lot of different fees. And so parking is one that he's looking at, saying, okay, do we increase the parking fees? The question becomes, okay, what kind of economic effect does this have on our businesses? Do less people shop here, and then we make less in sales tax? I mean, these are really good questions, and we're always trying to balance that in making the decisions. Some of the initial work that the city staff has presented to the city council, I like some of their ideas, and basically what some of their ideas are is that we keep the rates in the parking garage the same. We increase the rates at parking meters, and basically you can still come here, still shop, pay the same that you're paying now in a garage, or you can have, so to speak, more premium parking, of which you're paying a little more for. So that's the conversation. That's the conversation that we're having, and again, we're trying to strike the right balance. I would tell you, certainly, we're an urban area, and our parking rates here for Evanston are considerably less than they are in Chicago. And so that's also something they're considerably less than they are in Chicago, and that's something that we look at too. I'll also tell you, we're not, at least as long as I'm in charge and I have some say over things, we're not going to outsource our parking, like they did in Chicago to some, to some big company. No.
We'll definitely be on divvy bikes, right? Okay.
It's got to be a question about divvy bikes in that stack of about 50 questions.
Any questions.
All right, it's probably coming in. All right.
All right. I had gotten a question from a resident that had been hearing gunshots, even in the 7th Ward, just
Yeah.
off in the distance. I know I've heard
Mhm.
gunshots
Yeah.
off in the
Yeah.
distance and called the police, and so apparently others are hearing it too.
Yep.
But then what we're getting is, oh, it's just firecrackers, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I know the difference between a firecracker and
Gunshot. Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mhm.
I hate to
Yeah.
say that I know the
Yeah.
difference. I know the difference in the sound and
Mhm.
how it's firing off.
Right.
Should we be concerned? Like, what's really going on? I know, you all can't
Yeah.
tell us everything.
Yeah. Right.
Certain people
I mean,
you're
certainly,
watching in the
certainly
city.
right. I mean, certainly things that we track, right, is we
Mm-hmm.
track shootings in Evanston. We obviously track, homicides. Again, violent crime continues to be down. Okay, that's sort of a national trend, and it's a trend in our own community. Evanston continues to be, a relatively, safe community for folks. But nonetheless, the fact that there are folks out there that know what a gunshot sounds like, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's disturbing and upsetting, right? That happens in our community. I can tell you that anytime a call comes into our police department and says, "Hey, we think we've heard some gunshots," they come out there and they investigate, and we will get reports and it says, "Yeah, we've confirmed there was a gunshot fired over here. We don't know who fired it," and everything else. And then many times they can't confirm it. Now, I'll tell you, there is technology out there. When I go to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, there's lots of vendors there, and they always want to talk to you and tell you about the new technology or the products that they have that they think will be helpful to communities. One of those products is something called Spot Shotter. And Spot Shotter is sort of this listening device that you put up in different parts of your city. It costs a lot of money. You're talking, it can cost you $1 million to cover a certain area. City of Chicago has some spot shotters. They don't have enough money to have them in all these different places. That technology can actually differentiate, right, and can actually validate that, yes, there was a shot fired or there wasn't. Again, $7.5 million deficit. We just made a commitment, the city council made a commitment in the city to outfit all of our police officers with body-worn cameras. Mm-hmm. That's not cheap, okay? That's $500,000 or more a year for the body cameras. So we don't have the financial means to have ShotSpotter here in Evanston. Particularly given when we're saying, okay, what are we doing with other public safety costs like the firehouse that we talked about? Mm-hmm. We don't, but that, just so for the viewers and people that are watching, that technology exists out there, but it's not something. But rest assured that if you ever do hear something, please call 911. Let them know. The police will come out. They will, scour the area, look for any shell casings or anything like that would be involved in a gun. Because obviously, if there are shootings in areas, we want to know that our police, adjust on a regular basis their deployments and their tactics, working hard to keep us all safe.
Okay, Misty Wittenberg
Mm-hmm.
asks, will any items not on the budget cut list being considered, like meal, travel, membership costs? If I read that correctly.
I want to make sure I understand the question. Say that again.
Will any items not on the budget cut list being considered, like meal, travel, membership costs?
Okay, so thanks for the question, Misty. I have no doubt that city council members, when they're faced with all of these cuts, are going to ask questions about, administrative costs, whether it's food that's being spent on certain events, whether it's travel, and all of that. As I stated earlier, again, I think at the end of the day that there's going to be sacrifice asked of all of us in the different programs. I don't think it all comes on the back of one and not the other. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see some reductions in those areas. Absolutely, that wouldn't surprise me. Now, I will add, because I hear some people come and sometimes they say, oh, well, you know what, if we spend, money for city staff to go to some conferences, like, let's just kill that. We don't need to spend money on their professional development. I'd push back a little on that, because, again, going to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, this city really punches above its weight. For the size city we are, the innovations that we have and the way that this city operates, is pretty remarkable. And I don't think that happens by accident. The fact that our staff are active players in the world of city management, whether it's with the ICMA or other regional or local organizations. I do think there's value that brings back to the city, but I'm sure that will be a part of the conversation the council has as well. Related to that.
Tough decisions.
The next 6 weeks is not. The next 6 weeks is going to be, a really difficult and unpleasant time for everybody. I mean, again, these programs are valuable programs, and the services are valuable services, but something has to give, and that's what we're going to go through.
Well, a lot of people feel like some things just don't have to give. They believe that money is just not being handled.
Well, there is the other part of the equation, right? I mean, so this was Misty's question. Everything was about expense. On an expense side, there is the revenue side, right? So some people could, and there'll be people that come forward, and council members and others probably that say, hey, why don't we just increase the property tax? Let's increase the property tax 5%, and then we don't have to cut some of these things. So here's the big picture on the property tax. Your property tax bill that you get, and even if you're a renter, remember, built into that rent that you're paying is the owner's property tax. And it can fluctuate a little, but let's just say about 18% or so of that tax bill that you pay comes to the city of Evanston. Okay, another portion goes to the county, and then 2/3 of that go to support the great schools that we have in Evanston, District 65 and District 202. As we all know, schools are incredibly important here. Referendum passed overwhelmingly with 80% of the people that increased property taxes here just a year ago. And there is this feeling, I share this feeling, that property taxes are really high, that if you want to have this diverse community that we have, you can't increase property taxes. Because if you increase property taxes, who is affected the most on that? It's people in the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. Evanston becomes much harder for them. And so that's what's at play and what people are thinking about when it comes to property tax. But some people would say, I'd rather increase the property tax than sort of nickel and dime us on all these other fees that we have to pay around town.
No matter what, there's going to be a group that's unhappy.
There's one thing that I would like to talk about, and I don't know if it's a question here, but I think it's important for people to be aware of. Lots of people are aware that there's a referendum on the ballot about Harley Clarke, and we talked about that briefly. There's another referendum on the ballot about the transfer tax. And on its face, I think people will read this referendum and they'll think, oh my God, I'm not voting for that, because it says, do you support increasing the transfer tax by 40%? Which I think most people are just going to stop there and go, oh my God, by 40%. The details are really important. The transfer tax right now in Evanston applies to only those that sell their homes in Evanston. And when you sell your home, you pay $5 per every $1,000 in transfer tax. For 97% of the properties that have been sold, the sale price of those properties has been under $1.5 million. This property tax, transfer tax increase does not apply to those 97% of the sales. So what this is saying is it's saying we're going to keep flat, okay, what the transfer tax has been, which is $5 per 1,000, up to 1.5 million. The increase, and this would be a progressive tax, is for those that sell a property, whether it's a residential property or a commercial property, from 1.5 million to 5 million. Those folks, for that amount of money, would now pay $7 per 1,000. And if you sell a property over $5 million, it will be $9 per 1,000. So it's a graduated tax. That tax is estimated to generate about $800,000. That is not factored into the city manager's, budget. Okay, so if that were to pass, again, doesn't affect 97% of the sales, at least looking backwards at the sales. And so it's not one that's going to affect a lot. But, I can tell you the realtors, are opposed to that. They're concerned that it means that properties in Evanston may not sell or may not sell for as much. What I can tell you is the transfer tax, the graduated transfer tax that we're talking about between 1.5 and 5 million and 5 million and above is still less than the transfer tax in the city of Chicago. And things continue to sell in the city of Chicago. So, people have to use their judgment when they vote on that referendum. But please do take the time to get smart on that. I've explained the basics just now, but look online and make an informed decision when you vote.
Yeah, I definitely believe in that because I've reported on things and people just see it as me throwing a grenade in the middle of the city. But then, actually, I'm telling you, look into it. Look into it yourself. Get educated on it yourself, and you decide from there. So what is the status of the city's diversity goals?
In terms of the city's diversity goals, I'm not quite sure what that means per se. I can tell you that we've stood up, the Equity and Empowerment Commission. We've got a great group of 9 people that all agreed to be on that commission. Our equity and empowerment coordinator has been, I think, doing a good job. A woman named Pat Effiam. Pat, I think Pat's terrific. I think she's doing a great job. I think people are much more conscious of this. She is developing a framework in which can be used as the city is making decisions. I think equity is a big thing we need to be thinking about as we talk about some of these budget cuts and where things are getting cutting. Who's being affected, the most. And again, the same with increases to taxes. I mean, we just talked about the transfer tax. You could look at that, and again, you say, okay, well, who's getting hit the hardest on that? Well, it's the most affluent people or owners of expensive properties who are getting hit, the hardest on that, and are carrying more of that than others. And so, I think, diversity, if we're talking demographics, let's talk about that for a second, because that has changed over time. And we know the black population in Evanston has declined. The Latino population is increasing. We know about 65% or so are Caucasian, the other 35% of color in Evanston. One of the things that lots of people, I think, are looking forward to, but also a little nervous about, is the 2020 census. Right, that's coming up. There's a question there that I don't like. A lot of people don't like that actually asks a question about whether you're a United States citizen or not. The Constitution does not require that we're counting citizens. It's just that we're counting people and bodies here. And this big concern that is going to decrease potentially the number of people that actually complete the census. The census is really, really important, but we're interested in seeing what those census numbers tell us about Evanston and the changing nature of Evanston over the last decade. Lots of people will say, oh, well, clearly our population must be growing in Evanston because we've got the new development that's going on downtown and everything else. The fact of the matter is, while we have had a lot of development go on in Evanston, and again, people want to continue to invest here, the folks that are moving into those units are predominantly millennials, okay, who don't have children, or people who have already raised their children and are living in these. So the good news there is that it's really a net gain to us as to our schools, because it provides tax revenue into our school systems without the influx of a lot of kids. So people would say, okay, but still, with all these new developments, I think we'd have more people that are living in Evanston when we do the census. The other thing that's going on, though, in the world is family size is decreasing. And so as family size decreases, well, maybe you can't afford it for whatever reasons, right? Both parents working, everything else, family sizes are decreasing, even though we're seeing what we would think would be an increase in the population because of the developments going on downtown. So there's a net effect here, and I think we'll see that played out. And all of that, again, we'll factor in and we'll learn a lot from that upcoming census when it comes to this question about diversity. Again, I started off the conversation today and would reiterate, I think that having a diverse community, socioeconomically, racially, ethically, is a really great asset to have. Does it bring challenges? Of course it does. But I think the benefits of that kind of community far outweigh the challenges.
Now you said the Black population has declined and the Latino population has
increased.
Why do you think that is?
That's just a national trend. You'd find that in any of the big cities around the country with the Latino, actually just all over the country with the Latino population increasing, right? I mean, I think we have been for a long time a majority Caucasian country, and that is changing, and that is part of, I think, some of this, some of the angst, right, that you see out there, is that this country is becoming more and more diverse. There isn't going to be one group, right, that sort of holds, that power. And so you could argue, right, that there are, tactical things that, political parties are trying to do to continue to empower themselves. Again, and I think that example of the survey that I just mentioned, the census, and asking that survey question, are you a citizen? Who does that affect the most? It affects urban areas, because urban areas are more diverse areas, and you have more people there that may be reluctant now to complete that census, okay? Because I don't want to answer this question that no, I'm not a citizen, and so it could decrease the actual count among cities, thereby empowering, folks that live in urban areas. I'm sort of like, come on, like the number is the number. Let's just honestly count the number. But lots of tacks are being taken. So I know we're almost up on an hour. Why don't we do one or two more questions, okay. Malik? And again, I am open because there's so many questions, which I'm really just everybody out there. I'm really excited. I'm really excited that you're asking all these questions, that you guys are engaged and care about the city that we all live in.
Okay. Goodness, yes, it was a lot. I'm glad to see people are participating in this. So,
it's great.
I know I've gone to the city council meetings, and there's always kind of an attack on the city clerk's office. So one of the questions was, it's in this stack.
Yeah.
So what's the relationship between city council and the city clerk's office? I mean, is it getting better? I mean, what's happening
so
there?
Great question. So I would probably take some umbrage with that there's sort of constant tension there. I think where this question is really coming from is sometimes on the rules committee. We will take up topics that the city clerk has put forward. But I think at the very beginning, right, there were some changes that Clerk Reed, instituted. He didn't necessarily go and ask and say, hey, I want to make this change. He just, went and made the change. And then I think folks on the council and others, and there was one particular change I raised with him as well, I was concerned about. And so we had a little of that, but I really feel like for the most part, things are pretty smooth. With the clerk's office. The clerk's office, continues to work hard right now on early voting, which is coming up. Starts October 22nd on Monday. You can start to vote, and I think he's been working hard on that. And his deputy clerk Eduardo Gomez has been doing a nice job down there. So I don't think the tensions are, if there's this idea like, oh, tensions are really high. I don't think so. I mean, there was an alderman that had proposed a referendum to put out there. Do we want to have an elected clerk, or should we have an appointed clerk? And the reality is it's sort of 50-50 around the state whether your clerk's elected or appointed. And that never went anywhere at the time. Again, I just don't think that there's some big focus on that. The real issues of the day are the issues that we've been talking about here with the budget and all of that, and not with the clerk's office. I think, Clerk Reed and I certainly have a respectful relationship. But again, the mayor's office and the clerk's office doesn't, work a ton. I mean, the clerk's office, I'll tell you, one of the things they're certainly involved in is all the FOIAs and the Freedom of Information Act. And, the number of FOIAs is significantly increasing.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a bit. And I got to be honest, I mean, those increase. I mean, we think it may double this year over 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, we got, a little more than 700 Freedom of Information Act requests. This year, we think that number could top 1,500. All right, so you're talking double over 2 years, and that puts a lot of stress certainly on the system, because every time a request comes in, city staff have to go gather all that information and provide it to the requester. But
it's good to know that, because I think prior to Devon Reed, people weren't even aware of what FOIA was.
Mm-hmm.
So now everyone is educated on it.
Indeed.
Because of him, and
Indeed.
They're able to get out there and get information. It's gotten some people in trouble. That's for sure, those FOIAs. But you do get some information. You get your questions answered.
Absolutely. Here's the thing. I mean, you get some information, but, people ask for the FOIAs. You don't know sort of what their angle is or where they're going with it. And so they can pick and choose the information that they release if they have a particular point of view. I mean, I see some of that out there, and they'll waive some email, and meanwhile they're not waiving another email that clearly they must have received in the FOIA, and it doesn't support their case and what they're trying, or they don't want to put that out and stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, just one last question from Dan Coyne,
Dan.
Our angel Dan. Just one last one. Dan wants to know any suggestions for citizens wanting to volunteer their skills in Evanston. Like what can people do to contribute more to making Evanston a better city?
Well, thanks for that final question for today's session, Dan. There are so many ways that I think people can contribute around here. I think one of the most valuable may be through all of the different nonprofit organizations that we have in Evanston. So sort of pick your issue. What is it? Is your issue the environment? You know what? Get involved with the Citizens for a Greener Evanston. Is your issue hunger? Get involved in books and breakfast, right? And I just met with the executive director yesterday on that program. Is your issue an interest in youth development? Get involved with family focus. There are so many organizations, and if you're out there and you're like, man, I really have something that I'm interested in, and you're not sure where the volunteer opportunity may be, please send me an email. I try to do a good job. Like everybody, I'm not perfect. I try to do a good job on being responsive. And I'm happy to connect people. One of the nice things about being mayor in Evanston is you really do get this 20,000-foot view of all the good things that are going on in the community and the people that are trying to help. And I see, it is an important part of my job to help connect people to different organizations and different causes, and I'm happy to do that.
Yes, I've seen you do it, and I've heard people say, well, Mayor Hagerty gave me a great suggestion, and I mean, you've helped a lot of people, especially in business here. So we're going to end here because this man has things to do. He's got a city to run, but I want to give a shout out to Kamani, Martha, Tim, Dan, Jean, Misty, PG, Joan Marie, Ross, Benjamin, Tanya, Sam, and so many more for participating today. And we're going to have a part 2.
Sounds great.
With Mayor Hagerty. Gosh, we got so many questions. I'm excited that people wanted to really participate, because it's hard to get people in Evanston to really get out and participate. So thank you so much.
Of course, thank you, Malika, and thank you for the work that you, and I want to do a shout out to Dan Coyne. I mean, you two are volunteers, okay? And we just had that question about volunteering, and you volunteer, your time to cover a lot of this news that people care about, right? And lots of people view these videos and everything. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And this has been Malika, Evanston Live TV, and we'll keep you posted for part 2 with Mayor Hagerty.